Close the veil. It's not Jesus time yet.
Genesis, come on.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Chase Smith. This is Nigel Robinson. You're listening to Hyperlink, a podcast journey. So today we're journeying through Genesis chapter 4, the first murder, and this story is directly connected to the fall, and yet it begins to show the progression of chaos in the world. So we hope you guys enjoy Cain's legacy.
Cain's legacy. I love that. So,
Good title.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoy thinking about the titles. I do the whole teaching first, and
Yeah.
then I'm like, what should the title be? And then so I decided, or felt right this time, was Cain's legacy. So we're gonna start with the Bible. And who
Whoa.
would have thought?
What?
Weird. And we're gonna start reading. Chase, if you want to read, I
Yep.
opened up for him because I'm nice.
Oh, thank you.
Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, and you're not going to get very far before I interrupt you. So just
perfect.
Go ahead
You
and
just
read.
interrupt me?
I will interrupt.
Excellent.
Probably before you finish one.
This is good social dynamics learning. Genesis 4:1. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground.
Perfect. And it says that she conceived Cain. And that's the same word from Genesis 3:16. Chase, would you read that?
Yes. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth
Bring
children.
forth.
Bring forth.
Conceive. And the word for
Same?
pain, it's the same Hebrew word.
Okay.
And so that word for pain is sorrow. So what this is doing is it's tying together the Genesis 3:16 with Cain. In Hebrew, the word Cain means acquire. Acquire is a weird word, right? You think like to name a son.
Feels more like an asset.
Yeah.
Like
When you acquire something, like another person's involved in you getting it. Like if I go buy like groceries, I don't think I'm acquiring groceries. But like if we were to go do something together and we got something together, we acquired something.
Yeah.
It takes more than one, right? It seems like she's saying, because of God's help, I've been able to acquire. And then it says a male. What does it say in 4:1? A male son or a child. What does it say?
I've gotten a man.
A man. It says a man. So my ESV says a man. Some versions say a male child. But yeah, so a man. So she's, with God's help, I've acquired, and that word for man is not Adam, it's Ish, which we talked about in the episode, the beast and the Ish. And Ish is the man. It starts to separate the words. Sometimes they use man, and it's the word Adam, and sometimes man is Ish. So what she's saying is, what this verse is saying is, she conceived from Genesis 3:16, and she bore an Ish from Genesis 3:16. It's again the same thing. So here's the fun thing, that she thinks Cain is the promised son.
Yes.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
I mean, knowing the story from where we are, you're like, whoa, I know what's about to happen. You're crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's just wild. So can you read verse 2 again of chapter 4?
And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground.
So you get all this kind of wording around Cain's birth, and you get very little wording around Abel's birth. Why is that? Because Cain's the promised one, not Abel.
Yeah, in her mind.
Yeah, like when you read the Bible, you have to realize like this kind of stands out. Like there's Cain gets some words, and then Abel kind of gets like an afterthought. It's because Cain was to be the promised one, not Abel. So Chase, why would the text spend so much more time on Cain than Abel?
Well, I mean, the story does deal with Cain's heart, pretty much.
Ooh, so good. I like that answer.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I also find it interesting, maybe not totally related, but Adam's not really around. Like Eve's the one speaking, and in a culture where the man was the stressor, and like they get all of the important like words and things. Like it's interesting that very quickly, even though that's the culture in this text, she's the one who is speaking about the promised child.
That's so interesting.
which is very indicative of Mary.
Oh, wow. Well, let's pull that hyperlink.
So
that's interesting.
yeah,
It is
Okay.
interesting. Adam's not around. In
which
these
is very similar to Joseph. It's like, where's Joseph when he was around? From what we know, but like, there's not a lot that Joseph says.
It's also very similar to Jacob and Esau's story, because like
Yes. Rebecca is very involved.
She's very involved in the naming process, and she's the one who says like Jacob's supposed to, like, she has the vision or she gets the word from the Lord. It's as if like the woman bearing the seed is looking for the promised son.
Yes, always.
And the man is kind of like, well, we had fun, and now we have kids.
Yeah,
it's kind of what it feels
very
like.
pragmatic. He's like, I'm doing the mission. I'm being fruitful and multiplying. What more do you want from me?
That's what it feels like. I'm not saying that's what it is. It feels like sometimes reading it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like, and what we have to realize is women in the Bible are constantly desiring to bear the seed that will crush the serpent's head. And so they're looking for it, and they're going for it. And so like here, like Eve believes that Cain is this Ish, this man. And the words, it says that the man will rule over her. It's really rule with her, as we talked about last episode, or beside her, or along with her. So it's interesting because she believes he's to rule with her. It could make sense because if you read verse 1 again, I know we're going back and forth, but you got to read it. Verse 1, read it just all the way through.
Okay. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord.
Perfect. So with the help of the Lord is this interesting Hebrew phrase there, because it doesn't necessarily mean fool. It doesn't have to mean with the help of the Lord. The thing about Hebrew is what? Ancient Hebrew had no vowels.
Yes.
Right? So with no vowels, it means that we assume we know what the vowels are by the context. But you could change some of the vowels, and this phrase could mean something different. And so it could mean with the help of the Lord, or she might be calling Cain Lord. Because she believes this could be the one that will rule over her, to be the Lord.
Interesting.
So is Cain the one to strike the serpent? Is he the promised son? Is he the Ish the woman will be looking for? Is he that promised ruler? Keep that in mind as the story plays out, right? So verse 3, read that.
Verse 3.
Thank you, sir.
In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground.
Pause. This blew my mind here. In the course of time. What do you think that means, Chase?
I mean, long enough time for him to be working fields, but like we already knew he was a worker of the field, so who knows? I don't know.
Yeah. So it's something to easily read and just read over in the course of time. It means a long time happened. They got old enough to do things, right? They're old enough to be men now. It's kind of what I assumed. The literal phrase means at the end of days. What? The literal Hebrew phrase is at the end of the days. This is pointing this is pointing to the next moment. Like, this is the moment. Will Cain show us he really is the promised son or not? At the fulfillment of time, if you will. At the end of days, at the fulfillment of time, this is his moment. Will he fix the curse or not? That is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is, because like this is the first time, from what I know, that, and aside from aside from the first sacrifice being from God Himself, who sacrificed and clothed Adam and Eve, so that's Him. This is the first sacrifice or offering, I think, that we get by humans, I believe.
Yes.
So it's interesting that like we're like, okay, so now, I mean, we don't have Adam and Eve. We have Cain and Abel bringing sacrifice, so it's the sons of the first humans, and this is the first recording of their offering, and so it's like the course of time. It's like, okay, they're bringing their offering. Now we're going to see what happens, because what happened with Jesus is that way down the line, He brought His offering, which was His life, and He gave the best.
So good.
So it's just like, now we're like, okay, what's he gonna do?
Is this the one? Like,
Yeah.
because if you're following the story,
Right.
like we know the story,
It's
but
like-
you got to get in the minds of the people. They didn't know the story, and Eve did not know fully what was going to happen. So, is this the one?
Yeah.
This is the moment.
Right. Yeah. What is he gonna do? That's what the suspense is like, what is he going to bring as an offering?
Yes.
So the whole point is like they already know that they're watching and waiting. Like we're just going, oh cool, they're bringing an offering, but they're just like, what's he doing?
Yeah.
What's he bringing? What's he got?
Yes. And what happens next? What does Cain bring?
Not his best.
Well, fruit from the ground. It doesn't say it's not his best. It just says you can read it.
Let's read it. And Abel, so it says, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard.
Okay. So it says that Cain brought stuff. It doesn't say it was bad stuff. It doesn't say it was his best. It doesn't give us a clear side or the other. We do get the clearness of the first fruit, and we'll talk about that, or the firstborn, and we'll talk about that. That's interesting from Abel's side. But at the end of days, Cain brought fruit from, or vegetation from the ground. Remember we said back in Genesis 3, man doesn't get cursed. What gets cursed?
The ground.
The ground. Is there some kind of relation to Cain bringing his offering from a cursed ground? Is that partially why? I'm not sure. I'm just theorizing, but that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
That his fruit is specifically mentions from the ground.
Yep.
Here, Adama. And this whole story has a lot of allusions to the ground, because later on Abel, we know what happens, and his blood cries out from Adama, the ground. And then Abel did bring the firstborn, right? So you have vegetation versus animal death.
Yeah.
Have we seen vegetation versus animal death to appease a god or to cover up shame before?
Before the story?
Before this story. Genesis 3.
I mean, there's the trees.
Before that, after that, they fall. After that,
yes,
they realize what?
Oh,
they
were naked, and the fig leaves. And they use them to cover.
And then what does God do?
And God, in turn, he sacrifices the animals in order to give them fur and covering of skin.
Covering, yes. So you have vegetation that was trying to cover up shame, and it failed. And God said, I'm going to do it the right way with an animal sacrifice. And then the next story, at the end of the age, at the end of time, at the end of the days, I mean, what you have is Cain bringing more vegetation and Abel actually bringing an animal sacrifice. Firstborn.
Yeah.
Yes. Could Cain and Abel be offering some sort of appeasement sacrifice to cover their shame? And one, by making the same mistake their parents made, covering their shame wrongly. The other learned from God, not their parents, and did it correctly. Could that be what this is alluding to, or just blatantly saying in the Hebrew?
Interesting. So yeah, I like that. I think that my question is like, well, what else would Cain have brought? He was a worker of the ground. Is it just?
Yeah, but could he have not bartered with some of his stuff to get some sheep from his brother?
Yeah, but then is it his work that he's? I guess it kind of goes into like what's important. Is it like the type of sacrifice, or is it the heart? Like, where was his heart when he was giving of what he made of the ground?
Yeah.
So I think that's why most people, or at least what I've been taught, is like he did not give the best of his fruits. So, but I do like the whole connotations of like to the ground, and the ground was cursed, which that lines up for me. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think the Bible can be saying multiple things at the same time.
Yeah, it usually is.
And I do think that there's a lot around Cain's heart and attitude and posture toward the Lord that it will come up as we continue to read the story. But so far, as you were reading the story, that hasn't come up yet.
Yeah.
You don't know what's in his heart yet.
Right.
So at this point, we don't know why God, and maybe it is later on showing why God was disappointed, or God just decided not to accept his offering. I do like but what I'm kind of saying is that there was a right way to do it that God had ordained, and Abel seems to follow. If this is an appeasement offering, which the text and the Hebrew language kind of alludes to that as well.
Mhm.
It's not overtly obvious, but it is very. A lot of people, a lot of scholars believe that this was an appeasement offering. So if that's the case, and Abel maybe just didn't Abel did it the way God covered sin, while Cain did it the way that his parents tried to cover their sin, and it was not, and it was just wasn't right. It was wrong. So Abel understood that a blood sacrifice was needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. What is clear is Genesis 3 and 4 are paralleling each other. If you haven't listened to the parallel episode, pause, go listen to it. Super important. Parallels are all over the Bible. But it is clear that 3 and 4 is one of the early parallels we're having in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It's on purpose. It's almost a retelling of the same events of the fall.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to point some of those things out. But as we continue the story, just listen for that. So this story, again, points to the firstborn of Abel's sheep. Or I assume they're sheep. This is a relevant detail moving forward.
It does say flock, doesn't it?
Flock.
Yeah.
This is a relevant detail moving forward, though. Why? Because Jesus is the firstborn of God.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only one, but he is also the firstborn.
Of the fold.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really relevant because it's pointing to that as well. And you can always pull that from the firstborn information. And I think there is a hyperlink back to this moment right here of the firstborn being Jesus.
Yes.
All right. So let's keep reading.
I'll start in 4 for context. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell.
Pause. His face fell, and he was very angry. So Cain became angry.
Mm-hmm.
The word angry, it's like his face was hot. So I think that just I've gotten angry enough where my face gets hot.
Yeah, like red.
Like red and hot.
Yeah, your whole body gets heated.
Yes. Yeah, so Cain, it wasn't just like he was frustrated. It wasn't a little bit of mad. Like it was this intense anger that boiled inside of him. Like his blood was boiling, right? As we use that phrase here in America. And then it says his face fell. The word for fell is nafal. Is how I say it, nafal. I'm sure the Hebrews say it a little differently. But it's where we get the word Nephilim, which is fun. We'll get to that in a few episodes.
Okay,
or an episode. But Nephilim means fallen ones. So it's really interesting, right? We'll get there in Genesis 6. But Genesis 6 is picking up language from Genesis 4 on purpose.
Yeah, I think
Falling.
though too, when your face falls, when you are, you look down, which is like a lack mindset. It is like I've messed up, and it's very eye centered. It's very navel gazing, and it's also what we do when we're depressed and there's anxiety. We no longer you turn inward, which is everything becomes small. Ego takes over. It's this whole you're compressed as a person. You're not able to be your full self.
Yes.
But when you look up, let's say my eyes look up to the Lord, into the heavens. There's even a scientific thing where when you look up towards the horizon or to the sky, it gives you this expanse. It's letting you know that there's so much room and space. And I would say once you see the ocean of grace that is before you, you relax and you realize what God has made you to be, which is cleansed and good, and reminds you of who you are, which is a son. And that means you're everything to him. But when we focus on ourselves and we look down, we make ourselves very small, and we become angry. We everything hurts us. Anything that's said, even probably what God's telling him, is he's taking it as this awful punishment, right? God, the God of the universe is showing up and saying, "Hey, bro, this isn't good enough." In a loving way, but he's still going to hear that from a lack mindset, and then and then I think that's where this unfolds.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's so good. Keep reading, man.
Cool. So it says, the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it.
Okay, question. Why is God asking him why he's angry? Like, doesn't God know why he's angry?
Yeah. I think it's more for Cain.
But wouldn't it make sense that Cain is angry?
Yeah. I mean, I probably would be.
Feels a little justified, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
If your whole life you've been the man, the one, the promised one.
Well, yeah, especially if he was told that, which he probably was.
At some point.
I mean, he had to be told the story.
Yeah.
So.
And then you give an offering, and maybe it's not your best. Maybe it is. I don't know. But the Lord is not fully pleased with that offering. You can get angry. It feels justified inwardly.
Yeah.
Again, you said fall in faith, looking down inwardly. I feel justified. And I love this. Another thing. We have to pause here. The Lord God is talking to Cain.
Yeah.
We get this idea that when the fall happened, like man was separated from God.
Right.
But it goes on. The story goes on, and God is talking to Cain just like he talked to Adam.
Yeah.
So where's the separation?
Right. Yeah.
I'm just saying, we get this idea that like the sin was what it separated us from God, and that's what the death was. It's not what the death was, because God is still talking to Cain.
Mm-hmm.
So and what did he say? He said, if you do good, tov, which God defined what. God is the one who defines what's good and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And we've said this is kind of a running theme of the early parts of Genesis, is God decides what is good. And when we start to think we know what is good and it's apart from the words of God, we fall and we mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And we get ourselves into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, if you do good, would you not be what's the word says? If you do well, will it not go well for you?
Yeah, will you not be accepted?
Accepted.
Will you not be accepted?
The Hebrew word accepted is actually kind of a good translation. It connotes this idea of being restored, being lifted up, and brought back.
Mm.
When you think of restored, lifted up, brought back, what story do you think of?
I'm going to think of redemption.
You think of redemption, but if you think about one of Jesus's parables.
The prodigal son.
The prodigal son.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's imagery here in the language that like it all points back. It all hyperlinks back.
And it's the older brother, right?
It's the younger brother in the prodigal son.
Well, of the prodigal,
away.
but it is the older brother who is, I mean, yes, the younger brother does yes.
And face fallen.
Yes, correct.
Exactly.
Because he was doing the work.
And he's like,
and he was
is not
present.
everything I have yours. God's not necessarily saying that, but he's kind of saying that.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
If you do good, you get good.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, whatever you put out in the world is what you get back.
And it's not like God is saying like you own, like there isn't grace, because there's been grace already. Just God talking to him is grace.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like if you do good, you get good. You get no good if you don't do good. It's just saying, he's saying, if you do what is right, if you live righteously, will not you get what you're looking for, which is the well done, thy good and faithful servant kind of moment, right?
Yeah.
But there he is. And then what he said? He said, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you. And we have all these great pictures of like sin, like crouching, a snake, and sass is coming and get you. So the fun thing in Hebrew, the word sin is singular and it's feminine. Okay?
Okay.
It's a feminine singular. But when it says its desire is for you, the word it is a masculine singular. Interesting. Yeah. So it cannot be referring to sin, because it's a masculine singular. So whose desire then? It's the crouching ones. This chaos creature. The Satan, if you will.
Yeah.
The serpent's desire is for you. What was the curse of the serpent?
On its belly, it will slither.
It will eat the dust of the ground.
Yeah.
And man is made out of the dust of the ground. The crouching one's desire
is to devour
humanity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of symbolism at play in this moment.
Yeah. which is interesting because like really like a growing theme and like what I've been praying and meditating on is like how Satan, which is like he has no name, stripped of his power and authority, he is trying to devour us, not for the sake of, just like we devour food. We don't devour food to spite the cow. Like we devour food to gain the energy and the source of essentially power that we get that when we renew our energy source. Like we need food to get energy,
Yeah.
right? So Satan is devouring man, not to spite man, but to take away the power that we have and use it because he is without his own.
That's interesting.
And he doesn't, and he no longer, and he gets smaller. So I think that like that's interesting because like he's out to devour us because he's seeking power again, just like he was before he fell.
So interesting. I've never thought about that. I have to really think about that more. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. The serpent, the Satan, the adversary, what Satan means, desire is to consume man.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think the pagans always required human sacrifice?
Yeah, because it's kind of like Highlander, like, you know.
There can only be one?
Oh, well.
There can only be one Highlander.
Yeah, like that. I would say, yeah, but like they're also like I think that there's tribes and there's so many examples, but like when you devour the flesh of your enemy, like some people, I mean, brutally would take parts of people in the field as they killed them and they would eat them because they believed that they were gaining the power of that enemy.
They did.
So,
yeah.
So same, you know, it's terrible, but
yeah. So this crouching one is seeking to devour, seeking to its desires for man. And we have this interesting phrase, and it can be translated, "You will rule over," or "You can rule over it. You must master it."
Mm-hmm.
A lot of translations say.
Yeah.
Or because of the difference of the vowels, it can be translated, "You will rule with it."
Okay.
You were created, Cain was created to be like God.
Yeah.
To rule like God. Yet Cain is told, you have a choice. You can rule with the crouching one, or you can rule with me. If you do good, you get good. If you choose to let this crouching one take over, you rule with him.
Yeah, it's a choice of kingdom of heaven or kingdom of hell. Where do you want to rule?
So we have vegetation versus animals.
Yep.
That's from both stories. Now we have two choices. You get the choice. You get to choose.
Yeah.
The choice wasn't. See, this. Oftentimes, if there is a parallel, I would think, oh, the parallel is when they give sacrifices. That's not the parallel. Like the parallel is the choice afterwards.
Yeah.
From Cain, and it's like he gets to choose which side he's gonna live on after the sacrifice.
Yeah. So after he is, told off a little bit of like, hey, this is what you did. Yeah. But he was like, I think what God was doing is like he's saying,
after he gets correction,
this is what you did. Correction, yes.
He's coached.
And he's coached. Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, you have a choice now. It's not like, hey, yes, this is what you did. He's calling the shot. He's just saying, this is what happened. That's all he's doing.
Yeah.
It's not like this throwing in their face, like, what's wrong with you? It's like God saying, hey, this is what you did and this is what it means.
Yeah.
And if you want to do different, then do this.
Yeah. But know that
So what do you choose?
Know that there is an adversary waiting for you and desiring to consume you.
Yeah. Don't think that this choice has no consequences.
Yes.
And there's a result.
And what does Cain do, right? You don't have to read it, but what does he do?
I don't know. He's like throws his hands up in the air. He gets angry and he
goes out into the field.
Yeah, goes on. Oh, well, yes. That's the first thing he does.
As he kills his brother.
Yeah. The murder. The first murder.
Yes. This word desire, remember we talked about it last week. Last episode, Eve desired the fruit. She saw the fruit. It was good, and she desired it. These words are coming back again. And Cain, what was Cain's desire, though? What was Cain's desire? To have his offering pleasing to God.
Yeah. Yeah, it showed that he cared.
Yes.
Yeah, him being angry shows that he actually, that if anything, like that emotion, any emotion, but like it's a flag. It's saying, Cain cares.
Yes.
So I think we missed that so much in this story.
And I agree, because we said this last week too. The serpent's temptation to Eve was not to do something bad, but it was to be like God. It was to do something she kind of already had. We understand, but to do something, it was a good thing.
Yeah.
It was ambition to be better.
Yeah, but it was out of lack. It was saying you don't have enough.
Exactly.
So do this and you will.
Exactly. And Cain's desire is the same, the offering to please God. And he eats of the tree of desire, of ambition, of the crouching one of the serpent instead. And in turn, he gives God blood in one sense, the way he, but on the altar of the serpent instead.
Yeah.
In a field. I say the altar of the serpent because now they're in a field, which is where the serpent comes from.
Yeah. And it's the ground.
It's the ground. In turn, he sacrifices his brother on this altar instead of sacrificing the livestock.
Yeah.
It's as if he says, like, it's true, sacrifice requires blood, so here is the blood, God. It's as if he spites God, killing his God's image bearer at the desire of the serpent. Cain, the hopeful promised one, strikes his brother. And the prophecy of 3:15, I will put enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And at that moment, Abel, being the seed of the woman, because his offering was accepted, was pleasing, Cain becomes the seed of the serpent, embodies, is being used by.
Yeah. It's the depiction of like the spirit man versus the carnal man. Abel stayed in heaven mode, if you will, and he offered like from his heart, and it was pleasing, obviously, as it says. And then by depiction, Cain was in carnal mode. There was something in his heart that was off.
Yeah.
And it was most likely selfish. It was something that caused him to seek it. And he was already looking at himself. And when God showed up, God confirms his heart, kind of similar to Moses or Pharaoh in the story of Moses. And he was just like, and then what happens is Cain, instead of repenting, or he is confirmed in his heart state, and his face falls and it gets hot. So it's like God shows up and shows both of them where they're at, and they each respond in the mindset that they're already in.
Wow. So good, man. Yeah. So good. And what happens next after Cain kills Abel? What does God do?
He shows up and asks him a question, like
what does he ask
like
him?
The garden. Where is your brother?
What does he ask in the garden? Adam,
where are you?
Where are you? It's very the same phrase.
Yes.
Just added with a brother versus you. It's the same phrase.
Yeah.
Because these stories parallel.
Yeah.
Can we pause for a second? I've hit this earlier, but let's just kind of continue to see this. Cain just killed Abel. What we would call a beastly act. Like, it was inhumane to do that.
Yeah.
And God is talking with him. I thought sin separated us again, guys.
Yeah.
I thought it closed the door on the relationship with God.
Yeah. In fact, the sin is happening and God's showing up, not just turning his face away. He's literally showing up.
Exactly.
Just like the garden.
How could God be talking to Cain after Cain murdered his brother? Right? Come on, guys. So also, I thought sin was in us because we kind of glossed over it earlier, but traditionally I was taught sin was something inside of humanity, but here we see sin is
outside,
crouching, seeking to devour, but not. It's not. It doesn't start inside; it starts on the outside.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't get inside, but it starts on the outside.
Yeah. What's interesting, and I would love to look up the phrasing and the wording, but it does say sin is crouching at the door. It's like, did they really have doors at this point?
Yeah.
Like, are we talking about the door to your heart?
Ooh. It's outside.
Knocking it will be knocking it will be open to you. Seeking you will find.
Right.
Like, what are we talking? Like, I don't know. Like, it's very indicative of like, are we actually talking about a real door? Or are we talking about the door of your heart?
Yes, I know. So God's there.
Sin is asking to be put in your heart, just like Jesus is asking to be put in your heart. Which one are you going to take in?
And that's when you become the seed. Which seed are you going to live in?
Yes. But one thing has to live in there. Something
It's
does.
so good. So God says, hey, Cain, where's Abel? And Abel responds like, yo, am I my brother's keeper? Like, what are you talking about? This word
What a
keep.
response.
I know, right? Well, it's on purpose because it's the Bible.
Yeah.
The best book ever written, guys. The word keeper is the same word for guard that was used for Adam when he was to guard the garden, to keep the garden.
What am I my brother's guardsman?
Guardsman.
Am I the one who is to protect my brother?
Which was the promised one was supposed to do that.
Yeah.
If he was.
And instead,
yes.
he did the opposite
Am
of protect
I
him.
the one who's supposed to protect my brother?
I'm sensing Judas vibes here now.
Am I my brother's guard? And God says, Abel's blood cries from the ground, from the dust. And then there's a curse. And this is actually on Cain. It's not just on the curse. It says the ground will curse you. Whew, that's heavy. Cain is banished to toil even further away from the good and the delight of the garden. Like, yes, Adam and Eve are outside the garden, but Cain is banished further away. And then Cain says, this is too much for me to bear. Like, I'm going to die. Surely they're going to kill me out there on my own.
Whoever they are.
We don't have time to get into everything, guys. Yeah. And then God's like, I'll put a mark on your head, right?
Yeah.
The mark of Cain. So that no one will kill you. Is there a mark later on in the Bible that people get?
Well, the mark of the beast.
The mark of the beast?
In the last book of the Bible?
Yeah, it's as if it's hyperlinking back to this moment.
Yeah.
The mark of Cain.
Which also, there's an indication of like, there's two marks. Like the mark of Cain feels like this is like very carnal. It could relate to both. I'm not sure, but God is putting His mark on him, or is it? You said the mark of Cain, so.
Well, I call it the mark of Cain. I've heard people call that too as well. But like, Cain gets a mark. God puts a mark on him, so that it's actually a protective mark, so that nobody will kill him.
Yeah.
A lot of times we stop with Cain's story here. Right? Like, this is the end of Cain's story. Guess what? It's not the end of Cain's story, guys. We got to keep going. So we get to go to let's read verse 17.
Okay.
I didn't want to read it all. We have a lot, but you guys, please read it. But verse 17.
Not long. So 17. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch.
Cain builds a city. Why is that significant?
I mean, this is the first city on record we have that's built.
That is true. But what is an ancient city, though? What defined an ancient city? What is the criteria for an ancient city?
I don't know. I mean, I would say a city center. I mean,
okay,
like it has its own economic system of like producing its own wealth of some kind, selling, trading goods. I don't know.
Okay. The biggest thing, those are all actually part of it, a little bit at least.
Age of Empires.
The biggest thing is a wall to protect it.
Okay. Yeah.
The city had a wall. City walls. Every city had walls.
Yeah, every city had walls.
To protect it,
which would make sense in Cain's. You want to build a wall.
You typically had a king. Of the city.
Yeah.
And that king had like an army or some like people to protect the people.
Yeah. So he became a ruler of his own city.
Yes. But here's what's interesting is God said He was going to protect Cain. So why is Cain going off and protecting himself?
Still living in the lack.
Still living in the lack. And he builds a city and he names it after a son. And what is that? So why is that significant? It's not overtly said, but they're building a name for themselves. They're building a name for themselves. That is empire mindset all the time. Build a name for myself.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? If you're doing that, you're building a name for yourself, which is the first city mentioned. What's really kind of the next city mentioned? Babel.
Yeah.
Again, building a name. They actually overtly say, let's build a name for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just subvertly say it by naming the city after themselves here. But like in the sense, like we're building a legacy.
Yeah.
Cain's legacy. So what is Cain's legacy? That's why we got to keep reading because Cain's legacy keeps going. So you go through the names, get to Lamech. Because I know you can say that one.
I think it's 19. Yeah, that was the next one. So,
All right.
And Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those. Jabal.
Sorry.
He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jabal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe, musicians. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, and wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's 77-fold.
Perfect. So this is kind of we're reading genealogy. So we're going to pause real quick and talk about how to read a genealogy. At least my favorite way is, which seed am I reading? Which genealogy seed am I reading? And then you ask the next question, what extra information is given around in different names? Those are my questions. So which seed are we reading the genealogy of? Cain, which is the seed of the woman or the seed of the serpent?
Seed of the serpent.
So what you're going to get is information more for what it looks like to be the seed of the serpent. Okay?
Yeah.
Fun. Next question to ask is, what stands out? What people have extra information around their name? So what stands out?
Well,
we already talked about they built a city, but let's keep moving. What stands out with Lamech? We get information around his kids.
Yes.
We also get his wives' names. We didn't really get other people's wives' names.
Yeah, true.
So those all those kind of interesting, right? So Lamech, let's talk about Lamech's name real quick. His name, people argue over this. It's kind of frustrating, but his name, I think it means powerful.
Okay.
Lamech is kind of the reverse king, in the sense, king is Melech. And this is Lamech.
Okay.
So vowel or consonant wise, it's the reverse.
Yeah.
The vowels slightly, but so you have Lamech is, I would say he's the reverse king or the bad king. If you watch the Flash show, he's the reverse Flash. All right, sorry guys, I know, stupid pop culture.
I like it.
He got me into it, and I enjoyed it.
So good.
I enjoyed it.
Didn't end great, but yeah.
No, they never do.
No,
they never do.
But still pretty good.
But he's the reverse king. So think about that when you think about Lamech and what he does. So that's one thing. So he takes, how many wives does he have?
2.
He's the first person to take 2 wives.
Yeah.
Think of all the actions a king, a powerful person would do away from God, being the seed of the serpent. So he takes 2 wives. That's not God's way. The word is nashim, wives, nashim. Next time we see this word is used, the sons of God saw the daughters of man were attractive, and they took their wives, plural, nashim.
Interesting.
Back, and it's more just getting more chaotic and evil, right?
Yeah.
In Genesis chapter 6, verse 2. So that's the beginning of Noah's story. So this directly, this idea of taking 2 wives diametrically opposes Genesis 2:24, where it says 1 man and 1 woman. A man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife. It's 1. It was always meant to be 1. So God is not a God of polygamy, guys. I know there's a lot of polygamy in the Bible, but it's not the original intent of God for humanity. Okay. Hope that makes sense. That is, that's the work of the serpent. Because the first genealogy we see people taking 2 wives with is the seed of the serpent, Cain. One wife's name, this is fun, means ornament. This is the first trophy wife in the history of the world. Boom. The other wife's name means shelter. This is the first homemaker. He has a trophy wife and he has a homemaker.
Oh my gosh.
Like, this is what the names mean. It sounds bad. And he's laughing because it sounds like this is a terrible concept.
Yeah.
Like, but it's on purpose.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. There's nothing new under the sun.
No. So he's the reverse king. He's taking 2 wives. Let's keep going. His children become great and renowned at what they do. One's livestock, which infers trade, which is making money, building that. The other one is music. It's a musician. and iron, right? Farm equipment and weapons.
Mm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why does the text tell us all this? Technology.
Yeah.
In cities, technology grows. Economic systems all flow out of the city. You mentioned that. The kings. There's all that there. Lamech is this kind of reverse king. This is all not inherently bad, but what happens when neutral things are taken over by the seed of the serpent? That's the question. So in 23 and 24, you read Lamech's song, and what does it say?
Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, and wives of Lamech, listen to what I have to say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold.
Okay. This is a song. It's a song. So it means one of his sons is playing music. Right? Like, this is a song about a powerful man who kills people.
And blessing himself?
Yes, we have to look at the words. Strike. It says, I killed a man for striking me. It's physical hit. Wound is more emotional. It's an emotional context.
Yeah. Is this not indicative of like he will like strike you on the head and you will bruise his heel? Is there a wound? Is it the same?
The word strike I think is the same. Wound is different.
Okay.
In the what you're referring to in Genesis chapter 3, it's the same word, strike and strike. It should be just strike and strike, but they translate them differently for some reason.
Oh, okay.
But it's the actual same Hebrew word.
Okay. So
but
one
here it's different words.
Yeah.
Strike and then wound. So one's more emotional. Then you have a young man and then you have a man.
Yeah.
So basically he's saying, I will kill, like, this is a song, remember, it's not necessarily like it's not necessarily what he does or what he has done specifically as much as it's like a theme of his life. So basically he's saying, I will kill all, young and old, for not just hitting me, but even saying something I don't like. It sounds like a king.
Yeah.
A bad one.
Yeah.
Trophy wife, homemaker, and singing songs about killing people willy-nilly, frivolously, cavalierly, whatever word you want to throw in. And then, on top of that, he says, if Cain gets 7, I will get 77. Why is he talking about that? Lamech is the 7th descendant of Cain. In Hebrew, 7 is a number of completion. So this is why the Cain story ends here, or not fully ends, but this is the completion of Cain's story.
Yeah.
This is the completion of Cain's legacy, is Lamech. And what do you have? You have a man who's willing to kill anybody just because they get in his way, essentially. And you have you saying God will protect him even if he does. More sounds like a king. The authority has been given to me by God. I will do what I want type king, right?
Yeah.
Tyrant, king, insert whatever phrase you want to use. Lamech, powerful man. And that is his. So you see why I said Cain's story wasn't done. This is the climax of his story. His legacy is one that could have been of music, livestock, and metallurgy. But instead, it's death, murder, power, ambition, greed. Because his lineage were some of the best people at their time for music, for metallurgy, for livestock and tents. Like, it could have been, we're blessing the world with amazing gifts. And instead, we're going to use some of that metallurgy and we're going to write ourselves a song about how bad we are. And we're going to say that God protects us anyway.
To continue on to this, like, there's another Enoch and another Lamech.
Oh, yeah. That's next episode.
Okay. Because just fun fact, the 7th generation away from Seth, who is Cain's brother, also named Lamech. Fun fact.
Yeah.
So
fun stuff. It's really interesting, guys. So here we go. And then you have the number 77 remind you of anything, Chase?
Yeah. How many times do you forgive?
Jesus' teaching on how many times you forgive. It hyperlinks back to this story.
Yeah.
In other words, the world's chaos, like Cain's chaos, might be complete, but your forgiveness should be complete as well. You should be reversing the chaos spiral of Cain in your forgiveness.
Yeah. So in the story of Cain,
Woo!
when Cain, so if you or someone wrongs you, then the result is always going to be revenge upon revenge. But what Jesus was saying is, if someone does do you wrong, like Cain in this story, then your response is to forgive as many times as you are tempted to hold a grudge.
Exactly. Like Lamech, if someone does me wrong, I'm going to kill him.
Yeah.
Jesus, like, if someone does you wrong, no matter what, you forgive them
And you bless them. Yeah.
and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Because your forgiveness should be as powerful as Lamech, meaning power, as Lamech's power.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
So Lamech is saying, I'm justified by God. God protects me. God will have mercy on me. This is the Bonhoeffer, a German theologian.
Dietrich
Bonhoeffer, a German theologian, died during World War II, killed by Hitler. He wrote a book called Cost of Discipleship. And in that book, he talks about cheap grace. And Lamech is living in cheap grace. What the idea that, like, God's grace is just going to cover me and I'm going to go do whatever I want and be a seed of the serpent. But he talks about grace was costly to Jesus. It was not cheap.
Yeah.
And you can't live like that because it cost Jesus everything.
Yeah.
So grace was never meant to allow you to sin more. It was meant to help you sin no more.
Yeah.
Preacher words right there. So Cain's theme seems to be one of a ruler, and he was just not the promised one. Power, lordship, ruling with the serpent, corrupting every time. When you rule with the serpent, it's absolute. Like they say, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's when absolute power is corrupted with the serpent. It's absolute every time.
Yeah.
Lamech shows no restraint. Again, this is the reverse king. Lack of self-control. That was Cain's issue.
Yeah.
That was Eve's issue. That was the issue of the garden. They didn't have restraint. That's the difference between man and beast, is the ability to have self-control. Say, I desire something and I'm not going to do it. That's the difference.
Yeah, the ability to choose.
Yeah. So I don't want to end on a negative note, so let's finish chapter 4. Because Cain's line is just descending into chaos, and it's just getting worse. So let's end chapter 4, and then we'll pray it. Chase will pray us out. Go ahead.
Cool. And it says, so verse 25, it says, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord.
Woo.
Good for them.
At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. The exact opposite of calling a city after your son.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's look to the Lord for our protection, people. That's what that's saying. Chase, why don't you pray us out?
Yeah, we'll do. Yivrechecha Adonai v'nishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai penav ilecha v'yichunecha. Yis Adonai penav ilecha v'yasem lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for embarking on this podcast journey with us at Hyperlink. Your support means the world to us as a listener-supported podcast. If you've enjoyed our episodes and would like to contribute, please consider visiting patreon.com/hyperlinkpodcast. Stay connected with us by joining our community on Facebook at Hyperlink, a podcast journey. We value personal connections and would love to hear from you individually. You can reach out to Nigel on social media platforms under the handle @HyperlinkNigel. And don't forget to connect with Chase on Instagram at bespoke_and_bourbon. If you have any questions or would like to book us for an event, please feel free to email us at hyperlinknigel@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in and being a part of the Hyperlink Collective. See you on the next episode.